In the south side of Chicago, where broken streetlights flickered like tired eyes and sirens were part of the night's lullaby, Marcus Reed grew up understanding one thing clearly: if you don't fight for your space, you don't get one at all. By the time he was 12, he had already learned how to take a punch without crying. By 14, he had learned how to throw one back hard enough that older boys stopped calling him easy money. By 17, he was no longer just a kid trying to survive. He was something else. Something sharper, something dangerous. Marcus didn't choose fighting. Fighting chose him. His father had left before he could even form memories. His mother worked double shifts at a hospital laundry unit, coming home with hands cracked from bleach and exhaustion sitting heavy in her silence. There were nights when she didn't even have the energy to ask how his day was. Not because she didn't care, but because survival had drained all softness from her life. Marcus understood that, too. That's why he never complained. But understanding pain doesn't make it lighter. It just makes you carry it better. School was a battlefield of its own. Teachers labeled him troublemaker. Counselors labeled him at risk. Other kids labeled him don't mess with him. They weren't wrong, but none of them knew why. No one saw the nights when Marcus would sit on the rooftop of their apartment building, watching the city glow like it belonged to someone else. He used to imagine a different version of himself up there, someone in clean clothes, walking into buildings where people shook his hand with respect instead of fear. But those thoughts never lasted long. Because reality always called louder. His first real fight wasn't in a ring. It was behind a grocery store when he was 13. 3 older boys cornered him over a cheap phone he had found and fixed. Word had spread that Marcus could bring dead things back to life. To them, that meant profit. To Marcus, it meant survival. He sold repaired phones for lunch money and bus fare. They tried to take it. He said no. The first punch came from behind. The second hit his ribs. By the third, something inside him changed. He didn't think anymore. He moved, fast, violent, precise in a way he didn't understand yet. When it was over, one boy was on the ground crying, another ran, and the third just stared at Marcus like he had seen something unfamiliar. Not a victim, not even a kid, something closer to a warning. That night, Marcus walked home with blood on his lip and something new inside his chest. Not pride, not anger, recognition. He had crossed a line he couldn't cross. After that, people stopped testing him in hallways. But attention is a dangerous thing when you don't know how to carry it. Older men from the neighborhood started noticing him. Not teachers, not coaches. Men who ran underground spaces where rules were different and consequences were simple. Win, and you eat. Lose, and you disappear quietly. One evening, when Marcus was 16, a man named Darius Cole approached him outside a corner store. Darius was older, built like someone carved out of old violence, with calm eyes that didn't match his reputation. People said he organized fights in abandoned warehouses across the city. Illegal matches. No protection. No weight classes. No mercy. Just money and reputation. I've seen you move, Darius said, standing too close, like he already owned the conversation. Marcus didn't answer. You fight like you're not afraid of getting hurt, Darius continued. That's rare. Most people hesitate. You don't. Still silence. Darius smiled slightly. You ever think about making that useful? Marcus finally looked at him. I don't fight for fun. Darius nodded like he expected that answer. Good. Because this isn't fun either. It's opportunity. That word stuck. Opportunity. It sounded fake in Marcus's world. But that night, something shifted. Because for the first time, someone wasn't trying to stop him from being what he was becoming. They were offering him a place for it. The first fight was in a warehouse that smelled like rust and sweat soaked into wood. No lights except hanging bulbs that flickered like unstable promises. The crowd wasn't large, but it was loud enough to feel like a storm trapped inside walls. Marcus stood in the corner, wrapping his hands while his opponent laughed across the room. The guy was bigger, older, experienced. Someone who had done this many times before. Someone who didn't see Marcus as a threat. Darius leaned in before the fight. You don't need to be the strongest, he said quietly. Just don't hesitate. The bell didn't ring. There were no rules like that here. Just a nod. And then chaos. The first hit Marcus took felt like his jaw was splitting in half. The second sent him backward into reality. This wasn't school. This wasn't survival on instinct. Alone. This was war disguised as sport. He almost lost out, but something inside him refused to stay down. He remembered the rooftop. He remembered hunger. He remembered every time life told him he was nothing. And then he stood back up. The fight didn't end with technique. It ended with will. When Marcus finally landed the last strike, the warehouse didn't go silent. It erupted, not because he won, but because something in him had changed shape in front of their eyes. Darius watched from the side, expression unreadable. Later, he handed Marcus an envelope. Inside was cash. More money than Marcus's mother made in 2 weeks. This is just the beginning, Darius said. Marcus didn't touch the money at first. What am I becoming? He asked quietly. Darius looked at him for a long moment. Someone people remember, he said, or someone people fear. Depends on how far you go. That night, Marcus went home and didn't sleep. He sat in the dark listening to his mother breathe in the next room, thinking about every direction his life could go from here. College was never an option. Normal jobs never lasted. But this world of fighting, it was pulling him in deeper than anything else ever had. Over the next months, Marcus fought more. Each fight made him better. Each win made him known. And each loss, because there were losses, made him sharper. But something dangerous was growing to. Not just strength. Not just skill. Hunger. The kind that doesn't care what it destroys to keep growing. Darius started bringing him closer to bigger fights, bigger money, bigger names. Marcus started training alone in empty gyms, hitting bags until his knuckles split, running through pain like it was part of breathing. But the city has a way of noticing when someone starts rising too fast. And rising men attract attention, good and bad. One evening, after a fight that ended too violently, Marcus stepped outside the warehouse and found a black car waiting. Engine running, window down, a man inside wearing a suit too clean for that part of the city. He didn't introduce himself, just said one sentence. I know what you are. Marcus froze slightly. The man continued, calm as if discussing weather. And I know what you could become if you stop letting people like Darius use you. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Who are you? The man smiled faintly. That depends on what you choose next. Pause. Then I'm offering you a different kind of fight. Marcus took a step closer. What kind? The man looked at him directly now. The kind where you don't just survive the city. He paused. You own parts of it. And in that moment, Marcus felt something shift again. Not fear, not excitement, but something heavier. A fork in his entire life. Because behind him was Darius's world: violence, loyalty, survival. And in front of him was something bigger. Something unknown. Something dangerous in a completely different way. The man in the car waited. Marcus didn't answer immediately. And somewhere deep inside him, for the first time in years, he wasn't sure what kind of fighter he actually was becoming. The car door opened slightly. Decide fast, the man said softly. Because people like you don't stay unnoticed for long. Marcus stood still under the flickering streetlight. And then he took one step forward. And the door began to open wider. The moment Marcus stepped toward the open car door, time didn't slow down like in movies. It tightened, like a rope pulling him into something he couldn't fully see yet. The man in the suit didn't move, didn't rush him, didn't sell the moment with urgency or emotion. That was what made it more unsettling. People in Marcus's world always tried to push decisions. This man didn't. He just waited like the outcome was already written somewhere Marcus hadn't read yet. Marcus stood there, 1 foot closer to a life he didn't understand, the other still anchored in everything that had built him pain. Darius, the warehouse fights, the rules of survival he had lived by since childhood. What's your name? Marcus finally asked. The man looked at him for a second longer than necessary. Victor Hale. Marcus repeated it once in his mind. No recognition, no fear. That was rare. People in power usually came with stories attached to their names. Victor gestured slightly toward the seat. I don't need you to decide tonight. I need you to understand what you're standing inside of already. Marcus didn't sit, then explain it. A faint smile crossed Victor's face. Not warm, not cold, controlled. You think what you're doing right now is fighting, Victor said. It's not. It's being used in fights other people designed. Marcus's jaw tightened. Victor continued. Men like Darius. They don't build anything. They extract money, bodies, loyalty, damage. You're profitable to him because you're replaceable in his system eventually. That's not true, Marcus said immediately. But there was no conviction behind it. Only instinct. Victor tilted his head slightly. Let me ask you something. If you stop fighting tomorrow, what would Darius do with you? Silence. Marcus already knew the answer. Nothing. Or worse, replace him. Victor didn't wait for him to speak. Now imagine a system where your ability doesn't feed someone else's survival. Where it builds yours. Legally. Scalable. Protected. Marcus let out a short laugh. But it wasn't amused. That's not my world. Victor nodded once. No, it isn't. But it can be if you're willing to stop belonging to the one you're in. That line hit differently. Not because it was inspiring. Because it was insulting. In a quiet way. As if Marcus's entire existence had an exit door he just hadn't bothered to look for. He finally stepped back from the car. I don't trust people who show up out of nowhere, Marcus said. Victor didn't argue. Good, you shouldn't. Then he reached into his jacket and placed a card on the edge of the window. No pressure. No insistence. Just information. Come to this gym tomorrow at 6 a.m. If you don't show up, I won't come looking for you. Marcus didn't take the card immediately. He just stared at it. Victor added. But Darius will. That was the first real shift. Not the offer. The warning. The car rolled away before Marcus could respond. And for the first time since he started fighting, Marcus wasn't sure who was controlling the ring anymore. Darius noticed the change before Marcus even spoke. He always did. Men like Darius survived by reading silence better than words. You met someone, Darius said later that night in the warehouse office. Counting cash like it was prayer. Marcus stood near the door. Yeah. Darius didn't look up. Suit. Yes. A pause. Then Darius exhaled slowly. Not surprised. Confirming something he already suspected. They always come when you start making noise, Darius said. Marcus frowned slightly. Who are they? Now Darius looked up. And for the first time, Marcus saw something unfamiliar in him. Not fear, but history. People who don't fight in cages, Darius said quietly. They build cages. That sentence stayed in there longer than it should have. Marcus asked, what do they want with me? Darius leaned back in his chair. Same thing I do, control. Difference is scale. Victor Hale. Marcus tested the name. Darius nodded once. You should stay away from that path. Marcus almost laughed again. And yours is better. Darius stood slowly. For the first time, the calm cracked slightly. I made you something, he said. Don't confuse that with me owning you. That line was sharper than anything Marcus had heard from him before. The room felt smaller suddenly. Marcus took a step forward. Then what am I to you? Darius stared at him for a long moment. A son, a weapon, a project, a risk. But he only said, a fighter who doesn't understand the cost yet. And then softer. Don't let curiosity ruin what discipline built. Marcus left the warehouse that night with more weight than when he entered. Not physical. Directional. Like his life had split into two roads and both were pulling him at once. He went to the gym. Not because he trusted Victor, but because Marcus had learned something important early in life. Ignoring doors doesn't make them disappear. It just means someone else will decide which one you walk through. The gym was not what he expected. No crowds, no noise, no chaos. Just silence, clean floors, and equipment that looked too expensive for anything Marcus had ever touched. Victor was already there. Waiting. Not in a suit this time. Simple training clothes. Old scars on his knuckles that told a different story than his calm voice ever did. You came, Victor said. Marcus didn't respond. Victor nodded toward the center of the room. Show me how you fight. Marcus hesitated. Why? Because I need to know if you're built for transition or destruction. That word again. Transition. Marcus stepped forward into the empty space. No opponent. Just here. He moved. Fast. Aggressive. Controlled. Violence shaped by years of survival. Every punch carried history. Every step carried instinct. It wasn't performance. It was memory. When he stopped, breathing heavy, the room felt even quieter than before. Victor walked around him slowly. You're efficient, Victor said, but you fight like someone expecting collapse. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead. That's because collapse is normal where I come from. Victor stopped in front of him. Then we fix that. Marcus frowned. Fix what? Victor pointed at his chest. The belief that collapse is your baseline. Training didn't start like normal. Training. There were no motivational speeches. No promises. Just repetition. Pain. Correction. Discipline. Applied like pressure over time. Victor didn't train Marcus to fight better. He trained him to think differently. To pause before reacting. To observe before striking. To understand that real control wasn't aggression, it was restraint. At first, Marcus hated it. It felt slow. Weak. Unnatural. But slowly, something started changing. His wins in underground fights became easier, not because he hit harder, but because he wasted less movement, less emotion. Less panic. Darius noticed too, and that was when tension became real. One night, after a fight Marcus finished in under a minute, Darius pulled him aside. You're different, Darius said. Marcus didn't deny it. Different isn't always better, Darius added. Marcus met his eyes. Neither is staying the same. That silence between them was longer than usual. Something had cracked. Not loyalty. Perspective. Darius finally said. You're stepping into something you don't understand, Marcus replied. I'm starting to understand more than you think. That was the first time. Darius didn't respond immediately. Weeks passed. Then months. Marcus's life split into two realities. Nights in the underground fights where his name started carrying weight. Mornings in Victor's gym where silence replaced chaos. One built reputation, the other built structure. But nothing stays balanced forever. The pressure came from both sides. Victor's world wanted discipline without emotion. Darius's world wanted loyalty without question. Marcus was being pulled apart by diversions of survival. Then came the offer. Victor finally revealed the full scale, a legitimate athletic development program connected to international fighting circuits. Legal, global, clean. But only if Marcus left everything illegal behind. Completely. No underground fights. No Darius. No past connections. Just one clean break. Darius, on the other hand, found out. And he didn't speak for a full day after. When he finally did, it was not anger. It was disappointment. You think they'll make you free, Darius said. But they just changed the leash, Marcus replied quietly. Maybe I just want a different kind of leash. That was the moment everything shifted permanently. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a door closing in a room you didn't realize you'd never enter again. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He stood on the rooftop again. Same city, different weight. He thought about his mother, about the boy he was, about the man he was becoming. And for the first time, he wasn't just reacting to life. He was choosing it. When morning came, Marcus walked into Victor's gym. Not as a visitor. But as someone committing to a path that had no guarantee of comfort, loyalty, or forgiveness from the past. Victor looked at him once and said only one thing. Now the real work begins. And Marcus finally understood something he had never been taught growing up. Fighting was never the hard part. Becoming someone who doesn't need to fight to prove existence. That was the real war. And he had just stepped fully into it.